right, so I'm going to double check that we are live on the page, but as of right now, I think we are. 1 second. Yes, looks like we're good to go. All right, guys, happy Friday and welcome to another episode of the SPOHNTRAINED podcast. I have a very special guest today, best-selling author, Tedx Speaker, founder of Neural Associative Programming, and Tony Robbins Senior Leader, Lisa Lieberman-Wang. Welcome, Lisa. So happy to have you on.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. This is awesome.
Yeah, so your story, I think, is one that people, they need to hear because they're off. Most of my audience, or a lot of them, are stuck in that place that you were in. And then you, like me, kind of found your way through that into some transformation. And now you're really contributing and giving back. So I guess let's start at the beginning. Where were you before you got into personal development?
When you said where, I was ready to go specific and tell you what town I was in. So where was I before personal development? Pretty much I was just like any other traditional child growing up in a middle-class family. Parents wanted perfect children. I didn't know there was no such thing as perfect children, although I did do everything in my power to be that. And I was an achiever. I was a type A personality, did whatever I needed to do to be recognized, to be acknowledged, to be loved, and everything out there. And on the outside, everything looked great, but privately it wasn't.
Yeah, and that's most of us, right? We have, at least in some areas of our life, we put up this facade and we want people to see us as better than we actually are, while inside we kind of have this internal struggle, right?
Absolutely.
And so we all have a different struggle. Like for me, it's been a little bit of overwhelm and anxiety. For you, I guess, what were the emotions that you would struggle with?
Well, I think the first one was perfectionism. I had thought I had to be perfect. My dad wanted perfect children. And I didn't know there was no such thing as perfect children. Although, believe me, I tried in every manner I could to be that for him. To the point where we had to be straight A students. We owned a home in Long Island by the time I was 9 years old. And if I wanted to go out and play with my friends, there was a white glove inspection before I could go out because I cleaned the house. My mom owned 2 businesses, so she wasn't home. So if we didn't pass the white glove, there was no going out to play. So when I say perfection, I don't say it lightly. I say it literally. I think I was growing up in the military and just didn't know it at the time. But that's what it was like.
That's a tough standard to follow, right? And I think what happens is you not only have that standard from someone else, but you want their love and approval. So you put that on yourself and it becomes a pattern. And the primary question, how you're probably asking something like, why am I not perfect, or how can I be perfect? Which is never going to happen, right?
Well, actually, my primary question was actually what's wrong with me, because I couldn't measure up to being all that, my dad wanted me to be. And, I kind of think about it as an interesting manner right now. I'm in the middle of writing a book, Find to Fab for Business. And I started looking at my ancestry and where everybody came from and where all the stuff came from. Mm-hmm. And what I realized is that my lineage came from a line of entrepreneurs that came from Europe. My grandparents came from Europe. They, land of opportunity, opened up businesses, and this is the way it was. You had to be successfully open a business. And I looked at it and I ended up saying to my dad just passed away in January. I ended up saying to my dad, he had all these standards. And I said, well, a grandma and grandpa like that? He said, no. I was like, well, where did you get this from? Like, I'm thinking, he said, Lisa, there was never a book on how to be a good parent. I said, well, Dad, I'm sure there was. You just didn't read it, So, but, my dad, bless his heart, he really meant well, but he really was spoiled when he was growing up and he didn't want his kids to be spoiled. So he created these standards for us that were ridiculous. As a matter of fact, there were things about what he did that didn't serve me because he thought he was being funny, but he wasn't. His nickname for me was AH, which stood for asshole. Wow. And I would have preferred princess, but that's just not what I got. I did become one, yay, but it's not self-made, but it's not how I was brought up. And what ended up happening is in the world of trying to be perfect and really not meeting the standard, I actually ended up with challenges that I didn't see coming. And some of them was looking for love in all the wrong places. I ended up, wanting to get attention of other people because I wasn't getting it where I wanted. I was date raped at 16 when I was told I wasn't allowed to let people in the house. My mom knew I went on the date with an older boy, but nobody was home. And, I let him in the house, and that was stupid. And I remember when I told her what happened, she said, "Don't tell your dad, he'll kill you." And she was really just trying to protect me. But what I heard, the message that was delivered was, you did something wrong, it's your fault.
Yeah.
And it became a vicious cycle of so many other things. And what it ended up turning into was, like, there's something wrong with me. It goes back to that question, that primary question, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, so that's, a debilitating question, and we know that questions lead focus, and so when you ask that question, you're always going to be focused on what's wrong with you. But even in that traumatic event at 16, from what your mom told you, you probably just locked those emotions inside, store them in your body, and experience them over without being able to express them and go through that full range of emotion and let them out, right?
Absolutely. And what I found, which I didn't realize at the time, is I got ulcers. I was on Tagamet as a kid, medications to help the ulcers. I was dealing with depression and anxiety and asthma, which is really so much more emotional than we want to give it credit for. Had high blood pressure. So it showed up, whether I wanted it to show up or not, it showed up big time. And honestly, within 30 days, I lost 25 pounds. I ended up to be like 95 pounds. I had a sudden heart attack at 18 years old and ended up in the hospital. And I remember my dad was an engineer, but he liked to ride his motorcycle. He thought it was cool. And I was getting on the back of his bike one day and I just fell off. And they rushed me into the hospital. And what was so interesting is that he said something he may have said before, but I never heard. And what he said was, "I love you."
Wow.
And at that moment, not a conscious moment, but at that moment, there was a seed planted that made me think, you know what, when you're sick, they're nice to you. And before I knew it, I ended up finding out through the hospitalization that I couldn't even keep water in my stomach. And they said, "You have control over it." I go, "No, I don't. This is like, it's painful. I couldn't keep anything." And sure enough, they would watch, like I'd have water and I would like be throwing up all over. That's how I lost the weight. I just couldn't keep anything in my stomach because of the ulcers. And when they said you had control, it was like a moment of like, wow, I have control. Because there was no place in my life I ever had control in growing up. So this was kind of different. And thinking this would be cool, not for any other reason other than I don't know how to deal with anything. You can just stuff all the emotions and get rid of it. It became the beginning of dis-ease with myself. Was 13 years of an eating disorder. Wow. And I ended up becoming bulimic and was hospitalized literally every other year for 13 years, not for a week or two, but for like a month or 6 weeks at a time. And they were trying to find out what was wrong with me. The challenge is the secret that I was told to keep, I never told anybody. And because, again, as my mother said, if you tell him, he'll kill you. Yeah. When I was 18 years old, I was attacked by an employer. And I did tell my dad because I was fired for no reasons known to me. I was teaching for Arthur Murray and I went to deliver music. And the owner of the company, when I went to his room, we were at the Playboy Club in Great Gorge for a competition. He jumped me. And I managed to get out of the room, but I got fired, reasons known to me, Yeah. And my dad was ready to kill the guy. So mom's idea of what was going to happen totally was wrong. And he was totally the protector, was going to take care of his little girl. But it didn't matter. There was already something set in motion that, you need to be the victim. You need to have somebody save you or nobody loves you. So I stayed that way for the longest time and it really didn't serve me. But on the outside, nobody would have even known I was doing it because I was so successful. I was teaching and dancing at Arthur Murray. I was interning at IBM. I was parking cars to pay for the money so I can do the other stuff. It was quite hysterical. And at the same time, by the time I was in college, I was carrying partial scholarships and doing all this stuff too. So like I said, at the very beginning, on the outside, everything looked great. But privately, I was beating the poop out of myself.
So it's amazing how the brain works and makes all those linkages subconsciously, right? You have all of these extreme emotional events that create stories because your brain links up everything that happens at that time. And it really determines how you live your life and the actions that you take. And if you link up being sick and being hurt as getting love, pretty soon you find a way to make that happen, right? And it's not known to you. But it's amazing. And that's what got me so fascinated in the brain is stories like that we never get taught, right? You probably had no idea until you got into the personal development world.
Absolutely. It was actually a chiropractor who introduced me to the personal development because she actually knew my story and she said, "I can help you." And one day she's adjusting me and says, "Oh, Tony Robbins is doing a fire walk. You have to go." So I'm thinking, oh, Tony Robbins firewalks help bulimics. I'm thinking, I got this, a bulimia. So that was my thought of the process. And she calls Chris Hendrickson and he sets me up with a VIP ticket. I remember we're walking to the firewalk. I'm like this close to Tony. And I was like, I asked him, I said, so is this going to help me with my bulimia? And he just smiled. It was very funny. I had no clue what I was walking into. I didn't know who he was or anything else. I just figured firewalks help bulimics. That's all I knew.
So was there a rock bottom moment that got you into this, or did you just kind of by the grace of God get pulled into Tony's world?
Well, I don't know. I think every time you end up in a hospital is a rock bottom when you have a sudden heart attack at 18, when you're put away in a psychiatric ward and they don't know what to do with kids with eating disorders, and they put you with really sick individuals that are screaming and psychiatric, screaming, all have real challenges, not like you do. Right. I think there were several rock bottoms. My real rock bottom was I ended up getting to the point of such dis-ease that one of my hospitalizations, my company was audited. I had a computer consulting company at the time, and I was taking money from my own business to support the habit. I had 7 employees. I was in the hospital. One of my accountants did not file something for me, and it turned out that I got audited. And my brother, who was an accountant, not my accountant at the time, I didn't want my family to be involved. Turned out he had to be proxy to take care of it, and said, what happened to $100,000? And what had happened is $100,000 went down a porcelain toilet bowl because I was, as if a coke addict was using drugs, food was a drug for me. And I was consuming massive amounts of food in the tone of 18,000 calories a day, binging and purging. And looking at me, you would never have even understood it because I was tiny. I color coded it. I was perfect at it. I was very good, but so good that I was going to kill myself. So I think if you say rock bottom is the money I spent and what it cost me to be there, as well as the time and the energy and the loss of life in the effect of just, feeling unworthy and unloved and never good enough. And it took a toll on me until it needed to stop.
And it needed to stop, and then it did, right? So you're in line at the firewalk. And what happens next? Well,
what happens is more of a fast forward. The firewalk was good, but it wasn't the great thing for me. Okay. What ended up happening is I signed the Dickens process of going through where you are and what's going to happen if you keep doing it was a turning point, because my grandmother was huge in the sense of the only reason I didn't kill myself was because my grandma used to say, baby, take care of your mother's daughter. Because I took care of everybody else. I just wasn't taking care of me. Mm-hmm. And I knew that if I was to die and hurt myself, it would kill her. And I just didn't want to do that to her. And I signed up for all of the mastery program Tony offered and ended up at Date with Destiny. And that was the real turning point. Yeah. So they were looking for someone who was suicidal. And I don't remember ever raising my hand. And I know I didn't raise my hand. And of course, today with I'm Not Your Guru, and also because of working and volunteering with Tony for 25 years, I know that there are forms that get filled out and people actually read them. And mm-hmm. I had no idea, but all of a sudden I'm being singled out among 2,500 people for Tony to work with. And I'm thinking my buddy who we were connected with must have told somebody something. I'm really pissed. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I didn't raise my hand. Why am I here? But that was the beginning of the end of me hurting myself, because Tony ended up working with me for like 4, 5, 6 hours. I have no idea what it was to this day. And that was 25 years ago.
Wow.
25 years ago. Yeah.
So you had an intervention with Tony in front of all these people, right? Yes. And did you say it was a little blurry about exactly what happened during that?
Well, I don't, actually somebody sent me a picture a couple years later, which was very interesting about it. It wasn't that it was blurry. It was more like, I don't know how I got called, but during that thing, I do remember all that. But the irony about it is right after that, his trainers helped me, and I said, okay, I'm going to give back. I'm a big proponent of, doing service and contribution, and I'm going to volunteer and support because he's helped me. I'm going to help him. What happened is 3 months later, I ended up back in disease. And I'm back in the food, and Joseph McClendon III was coming into New York and for the basket brigade, and I was already volunteering for it. And I just didn't want to be there. It was like, I'm not going to be there, but Joseph's coming, I should go. And I was in such a bad place, and God always works in mysterious ways. For me, he serves me all the time. And what happened is I went despite the fact I didn't want to be there. And we're only 12 of us. We're just planning how we're going to collect all these baskets to the needy, you know, the whole thing. And all of a sudden, this guy is talking and my back's to the door, and he turns around and he said, "And here's Tony." And I'm like, what? Tony Robbins walks in and there's 12 of us.
Nice.
And I look up and he comes in, and, you know, the massive giant that he is. Yes. And he says, "Does anybody have any questions?" And I raised my hand. I'm so, you know, shy. And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Yes." I said, "Well, if you're so great, why am I still fucked up?" So he looked at me, and totally without missing a beat, he asked me, you know, "What's your purpose?" And in that moment, it was like I didn't have one. I was totally just focused on hurting me. And he said, "I have this new technology." He's like rolling up his sleeves, and he goes into a 3-hour dissertation. You know him, you know, it's going to start training. Yeah. And he comes over to me after, gives me a big hug and kiss, and says, "Don't ever ask me that question again." So I was like, so that was the beginning of the end for me, because what I did is I went on a quest. I went on a quest to understand why we do what we do. Yes. And every single person in the footnotes of any of his programs, if they were still alive, I traveled around the world to learn from them for the last 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that kind of kicked off this transformation. And just give us a highlight of some of the things you got into, because it's similar to some of the things I study as well.
Well, I mean, it started out with John Gray on relationships and Barbara DeAngelis, and then I started learning about Alison Armstrong and Byron Katie. And of course, Jim Rohn was the beginning with me, but Deepak Chopra started before that. And then my education, because I worked for IBM and MCI, and I was in corporate sales for years, I was already trained by Tom Hopkins and Jay Abraham and Zig Ziglar and some of these other people. But then it wasn't going to stop there, because I decided I needed to be the best of the best. So I learned from Dr. Bandler and Grinder and also Dilts, and became a licensed master NLP practitioner and trainer, because Tony learned from them. So I had to learn from them. Yeah. I continued dealing, you know, going through the circuit, whether it be from learning from Keith Cunningham or Frank Kern, or going to learn from John Maxwell or Andy Andrews, and the list goes on and on and on and on, and Esther Perel and other people, because I really believe that, well, first, I switched my addiction from food to education, is what I figured out.
I did the same thing, yeah.
That was the deal. And I also spent over $1 million learning from all these people. And at the beginning, it wasn't to do anything with it other than to help myself. It was really a quest to have to know more. What was it that I was doing? Why was I doing it? And then it switched during my platinum year with Tony Robbins. Yeah.
So it switched from the learning and taking in, and then what changed during that platinum year?
Well, what Lauren Slocum Lahav right now, you know, Lauren and I go back 25 years, and at the time it was 17 years. We're in Egypt in the Four Seasons, and she had known that I had been doing volunteer work, now 25 years, but at the time 17, helping people that were sexually abused and eating disorders. And she said, "You're playing small. You're supposed to be helping more people." And I was like, "Lauren, I just never play small." And she says, "No, you're playing small. You're supposed to be helping people." I said, "No." So she starts muscle testing me and doing kinesiology. And I said, "I teach people how to make money." And that's what I've been doing for 26 years. You know, that's my primary business for 26 years, teaching people how to be entrepreneurs and make money. So I've been building people's minds and businesses for years. Yeah. And she says, no, you're supposed to be helping women." And I balked. I wasn't going to. And totally amazing that right now we're on Facebook, because this will make sense, is it turned out that I said no. And a year later, to the same week, I wake up out of nowhere and I turn around, I come downstairs, I call my husband Handsome. And I said, "Handsome, I'm supposed to save lives." I said, "I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but you need to take over our other businesses." Now, mind you, we owned 3 businesses at the time. So after I picked him up off the floor, it's like, what? Yeah. I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. This is what I'm supposed to do. I get on the computer, and there's a picture of Lauren and I, our feet, literally our shoes, our purses are on the floor. And Dr. Walker, one of the platinum partners, which is we were traveling privately with Tony. There was like 50 of us traveling. It was amazing. It turns around, takes his picture, tags it. You know how you can tell when someone tags me? Tags it, obviously within 24 hours of this dream. And I turn around and say, okay, God, that was confirmation enough. And then I see the next picture, and it's Lauren pushing the hair away from my eyes, and I'm crying. And I was like, okay, this is it. I'm supposed to do it. And that was the beginning of, the journey of switching everything for myself. I ended up writing this book, Find to Fab, and it became a #1 bestseller. And it was 7 Secrets, a successful woman's journey away from depression, disordered eating, and self-sabotage. And it's really about, why we hurt ourselves and how to stop doing it. It doesn't have to be food. It can be stinking thinking, procrastination, all that stuff, And it turned out that because of it, it was just amazing. It was the beginning of the end of a whole new era for so many things, but I'm happier and more fulfilled now than I've ever been in my entire life.
That's amazing. What a great story. So your book, what's with the title? Because FIND's an acronym, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, you want to talk about that?
So FIND is how I used to feel. And obviously, I curse by now. So FIND is how I used to feel, which was fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And I felt I'd much rather be fab, fabulous, awesome, beautiful. And it came about because my family used to say to me, how are you doing, Lisa? How are you doing? I'd be like, fine. And like, how are you doing? How are you doing? I'm like, fine. And then finally, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. Leave me alone. It's like now it comes to the point, if I ever say the word fine, they go, which one, yours or mine? I'm like, no, yours. I'm really great.
That's good. So the book's kind of your story transformation. And then I'm sure it gives tools to your audience on how to do that for themselves, right?
Well, actually, it's not even my story of transformation. What it is neuroscience and human psychology. With the $1 million I spent out there learning why we do what we do, I was more interested in the mechanics of how do we shift, what we're doing. And if you can program a computer to do what people are doing, we can program ourselves to do what other successful people are doing. So it's more about how to reprogram our destructive beliefs and to be able to, install some better operating systems.
Yes. So your system for that is Neural Associative Programming, right? So tell us some of the distinctions that you developed and how you use that to shift yourself and your clients.
Absolutely. So I ended up partnering with Willard Barth, and Willard and I have both been in the personal development field together, combined over 50 years. Wow. And what ended up happening is we had realized that although there were so many great tools out there, whether it be the NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which I'm licensed with, or whether it be NAC, which is neuro-associative conditioning, or we look at cognitive behavior therapy or dialectical behavior therapy, or all these other ones, and we look at Gestalt and so forth, there seemed to have been a missing piece. And the missing piece is that a lot of times, because we know that we're all going to generalize, delete, and distort the information we get, we take information in as if it's the rule. And it may not be, and it may be contextually, this is how it is in association to where I am right now, but this is not who I am and how I am all the time. So neuro-associative programming was really about your brain associated to what's happening in this moment contextually and how we're programming in that situation. And what we created is a 5-step process of identifying the source code, decompiling, identifying critical updates, decompiling corrupt programs, installing the upgrades, and testing and debugging. And in doing it, it was quite fascinating that in these 5 steps, we can create change like this. And we have about 50 different modalities that we can use for each step to do it.
Wow. So I love that 5-step process. And when you talk about the modalities, are you talking about kind of submodalities within the 5 senses?
Well, submodalities is a small piece of it. When you're using submodalities, I know you do hypnosis and other things as well. All the stuff that we've learned over the years, I say weeks, I know you're a student as well, we've learned are all part of it. We've encompassed everything out there because we believe there's certain therapeutic things that do work and they still work. I mean, you think about it, Jeremy Bentham back in the 1700s said, we do more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. Yet I heard Tony for 25 years saying it. I thought it was his. Right. So I say that the stuff's been there for centuries because it has been for centuries. A lot of things work, but what it is some things don't anymore. I remember when I was studying with Dr. Bandler, he was teaching the 6-step. He used to teach a 6-step framework, and he said, I don't do it anymore because this is better. But then I went to somebody else who was teaching it and didn't know Bandler's current status, where he said, this was working then, but it's not now. It's antiquated. You need to upgrade the operating system. And that's what made me think of the NAP, is that we're sitting here thinking that this is the only way to do it. It reminds me of the story, the young girl's watching her mother cut the ham for Thanksgiving. She goes, Mom, why are you cutting the ham like that? She goes, I don't know. My mom cut the ham like that.
Right.
So she says, well, call grandma. Grandma, why'd you cut the ham like that? She goes, I don't know. My mom cut the ham like that. So then they call the ex-grandma, why'd you cut the ham like that? She goes, well, I never had an oven big enough. So, but the thing is, they're still cutting the ham. Right. They don't have to. The oven's big enough. So when you think about it like that, there's a lot of things that change, and we have to think of it in the fact that certain things about human behavior doesn't change, but how we get there can.
Yeah, and I believe personal development is really just continually upgrading our subconscious programs with conscious choices, right? Yeah. Shedding layers of fear and ego and automatic response to be more of our true selves and conscious selves in the present moment.
Awesome.
And so that's kind of what you do with these programming techniques, right?
Absolutely.
Very good. Very good. So you've transformed your life. You've gone through this whole process. You've learned things. Now you're contributing. You're being fulfilled by that. Tell people how they can find you, I guess, and what else you're working on. I know you have a new book coming out, right?
Absolutely. So the easiest way to find me is to look for Lisa Lieberman-Wang. I'm the only Jewish Chinese woman out there with this name, Lisa Lieberman-Wang. And also you can go to findtofab.com. Findtofab.com, find me on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so forth. But I want to give everybody a gift, and then I'll tell you what I'm doing. But if you'd like this book, as I'm coming out with a brand new one, Find to Fab for Business, I only did this on, first time I did this was on Inside South Florida. I was just on the CW a couple weeks ago. I gave this book away. I'm going to give you the same link because I haven't taken it down yet. And it's www.fabvipevent.com. And if you go there, you'll get my book, and you don't have to spend the $25 you'd have to pay on Amazon. You can get it for free. That's right, free. And free has no value unless you read it. So I'm going to make sure that's clear, right? You got to read it. And I will even offer, if you read it, there'll be a way for you to get in touch with me and get a consultation as well, which is worth hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to work with me. So, but the thing that I actually do is I run these transformational programs for successful people, perhaps not with themselves. And what I found is that all these professionals coming to me for different reasons, and we found that the root cause, we had to work on them first, right? Mm-hmm. And then they wanted to work on their business, and I own 5 businesses now, and one business alone does millions a year in revenue, and people figure, well, how do you do that? They can't even get to a business where they're making a couple 100,000, let alone millions. And it really all starts with the 6 inches between your head. And if you get that down, you can do anything. So right now, because of them, I've been coaching all these coaches and professionals and entrepreneurs. After we take care of their personal stuff, I'm coaching them on business. They're like, well, I need to know how you're doing. What are you doing? And all the other stuff. So I decided, okay, we're going to write the book on it. So if you find me on Facebook and say I'm in, I want it. I don't have the link right here in my head. I'll have to put it on the note underneath here so that if they want to get in on that, I'm going to be giving that book away free too, but only for the first people that say I want it before it's done. So my goal is to get it done the next week. So they have to do this right now.
Beautiful. Well, that's very generous of you. I put a link for fabvipevent.com
Thank you.
In our notes here. But it's been amazing talking with you, and I definitely see a lot of similarities in our belief systems and kind of the programs we use to shift people. So it's been fun to see someone who's a little farther down the line. It makes me feel like I'm at least on the right path. So I appreciate your time. I know you're out there in the world making a huge impact. I can't wait to see you at one of these events coming up, hopefully this year, and we'll get to spend some time together.
That sounds awesome.
So I usually ask 2 questions at the end of the show. One is, what's the most transformational personal development event or experience that you've ever been through?
The most transformational, I have to say, is the opportunity I had when Tony worked with me.
Okay.
I don't know that I can beat that right now. The second one was our Plat year in Cabo for a relationship trip when both my husband and Tony were on one side and I felt like I was on the other. There was a moment of interesting transformation that happened. And the good news is that we're actually, a picture of Cabo just showed up on my screen, no joke, with my husband and I. So that was another sign, just like the Facebook sign. I believe in signs, obviously.
Yeah, of course, me too.
So that would be the other, was a huge transformation. Sometimes we have exactly what we want in front of us and we're still looking for it.
Right. So the last question is there one book, like if you had one personal development book that had the biggest impact on you, what was it?
The 4 Agreements.
The 4 Agreements. Okay, that's a good one.
The 4 Agreements, I think, was one of the biggest one. I also loved, I have so many though. I also loved Failing Forward by John Maxwell. I thought that was awesome. And also Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. You're going to see my addiction show up here now. Okay. I'll stop. But yeah, there's a lot of great people that I think give so much information. And I think one of the things that people need to do is find something and just stick to it.
Yeah.
Because if you start reading and listening to all these things long enough, you're going to find there's a lot of redundancy and it's just packaged a little bit different. You just need to find what works for you and use it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so grateful that we got to connect and I got you on here. And Jen Pearson's been leaving a few comments. She's the one that connected us. So
yes, thank you, Jen. This was awesome.
Grateful for her as well. And yeah, like I said, I can't wait to see you. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you. You're doing great things.
Have a great weekend. Bye.